Thank you very much for my dedicated team to really run this forward and push it forward. And I want to invite Paul Dunn, who kindly agreed to share with us a keynote today and about his perspective into impact investment and into this social return on investment. Because this is what we believe is the conversation nowadays. It's not about just as I said, great numbers and lots of resources. Thank you again, and Paul, you are welcome.
Yeah, surely, sure can. Good morning. Labas ritas. Is that what I said? Yeah, I hope so. That what I just heard, excuse my Lithuanian, this is my English. And in Singapore, where I live, people understand it. So hopefully you will understand it too. I just want to let you know that I feel so privileged to be here because for a number of reasons, I travel around the world hearing this kind of stuff. That's what I do. That was one of the most amazing presentations and success stories that I've ever had the privilege of listening to. Well, can we just say that that really was amazing. And by the way, I'm thrilled to be back in Lithuania. This is my second time. And when I arrived yesterday, I understood, enter my password. Yes, okay. Let me just do that. Oh, there we go. It's all right. Oh, come on. There we go. That should be there. There we go. Okay. Yes, I really understood why Lithuania is such a great place to be in. Just picture the scene. I got off my Polish aircraft, LOT, yesterday. So much better than, what do they call it? Ryanair, so much better. And there was Egle to meet me. So we got in the car park and she said, let me just choose my car. What? You choose your car. She said, yes, do you like this one? Or do you prefer this one? Or do you prefer this? I said, what on earth is going on? She said, it's a new startup right here in Lithuania. It's called CityB. Remember CityB? And then I got in that thing. I've never seen that anywhere else in the world, right? You can open it up just like you can riding. In Singapore, they do it with bikes, but not with cars like that. And it's amazing. What is it? They pay for the petrol. They pay for your parking fines. No, they don't. No, they pay for your parking. They don't pay for your speeding fines. They don't do all of that. But what an extraordinary, extraordinary thing. And that, to me, is part of the essence of being in this wonderful place. So again, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for everything that you do with JA. And hopefully, we're going to be able to add some things in to your understanding of where we're going. So, and by the way, stop me at any time if I'm speaking too quickly or if it didn't make any sense. Okay, is that all right? And your first name is?
Difficult.
Difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we welcome Difficult? No. Try me. Correct. Well done. Okay. So just wanted to check that you got it right. So let's have a look. And I want to give you kind of like a global perspective so that you will understand just how good these numbers are when we think about impact investing. By the way, in Australia in the last 2 years, impact investing has grown by 715%. It's amazing stuff that is going on. And we hear all sorts of words, like, for example, the circular economy. That doesn't look very circular for some reason. It looks more oval, but don't worry about that. But if you look at that in relation to what's happening here in JA, then what a wonderful kind of circle you've got. We've got government, we've got business. And where are the business owners, by the way? Can I see all the business people in the room? Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for what you do. And then looping that back into education, which is one of the most important things. And so what you've got going here is there's Lithuania in the middle, there's education, but not just education. There's entrepreneurship education. And the numbers on entrepreneurship say that we've never seen the kind of growth that we're seeing in entrepreneurship unlike now. The prediction is, amazingly enough, that by 2028, we will have 1.3 billion entrepreneurs in the world. It's just astonishing kind of growth that's going on. And to see what you're doing with those numbers, could I borrow your report? Aren't these numbers amazing? That was a question. Aren't these numbers amazing? Yes, they really, really are amazing. So let's have a look at what that means, because I think there's something that we sometimes don't understand about the value of what we're doing. So when you think about what's happening there with government, with business and schools, and we think, oh yes, that's great because it's about education and it's about entrepreneurship, it's actually about something else as well. What it's actually about, I think, is legacy. It really is about that. It's about something extraordinary that we're creating now for the future. Someone said to me recently, they said, when it comes to this whole sort of mess that our planet is in right now in lots of places in the world, they said we need to understand that we are not inheriting this from our forefathers. We are borrowing this from our children. Does that make sense? And so it's an interesting way of thinking about those things. So let's see where that leads us. And I wanted to give you this perspective, as I said, globally, but also at the same time underpin the importance of what you're doing. And part of this is what I call this push to purpose. And of course, JA was way ahead of this curve in Massachusetts. So for me, this kind of begins in 2008. Did we have that thing in Lithuania called the global financial crisis? Did we have that? Yeah, everywhere had that, right? And it was kind of interesting what happened, because at that point, if you go back before that, the kind of ethics that, quote unquote, ethics that business had was that greed is good. And then what happened in 2008, we realized, whoops, that didn't work so well. Okay, and so there was this major shift going on in 2008, and I want to and it's now hockey stick, like that sort of growth. Some interesting things happened in 2010, which we may or may not be able to get to, and then in 2015, something absolutely extraordinary happened, and in 2018, some interesting things happened as well. Let's just start with 2018. In 2018, some of you may know of this guy. This is a guy whose name is Lawrence Fink. Some people, his friends, call him Larry, so I call him Lawrence. So anyway, he is the CEO of a company, and the guys in Moody's. Where are the guys from Moody's? By the way, welcome. Congratulations that you're doing this. Well done. So you probably know of BlackRock. BlackRock is the largest firm or company in the world in terms of funds under management. So what they do is they go out, they find investors, and then they invest that money in the hope of getting a great return. He controls, so word has it, the fate of $6 trillion every day. Every day. So that means he's pretty big, right? Even bigger than Moody's, I think. Probably, yeah. So and every year he addresses Wall Street, or the stock market. And here's what he said in 2018. He said, to prosper over time, every company, meaning yours and mine, must not only deliver financial performance, it must also show how it makes a positive contribution to society. Now, all of us in this room know that. But that's the first time when anyone had the courage to say that to Wall Street. And still the reverberations, the ripples of that are still going around the globe. And then, by the way, have a look at how he ended this in January 2018. He said, and if you don't do that, we will not invest in you. How many people get that that's kind of significant? Yeah, it's really is significant. Just an amazing, and this sort of speaks to the change that's going on in our world, which I've got to say you're leading. You're not following, you're leading this change. You really are. You really are. That was just astonishing back then. So let me just flip then to 2015. 2015 was interesting. I said there was a milestone in 2015, and it happened in Geneva. And it happened on the 23rd of September 2015. And this thing was what was going on in that room was live streamed, and I was sitting in my home, actually, in Singapore, because it was about 10:30 at night, and I was trying to get it locked in, and all of a sudden there was lots of hash, and bang! All of a sudden we were in. The connection kind of worked. And so what happened here? How many of us remember the millennial goals? The millennial goals that happened in 2020 or 2000, right? And so when they ended, then a whole group of really, really, really interesting business thinkers got together and said, we need to rethink what's going on. And so there were people in this room for 3 years, well, not in that room for 3 years, but who were working on it for 3 years, including some people you would know. Bill Gates, for example, was working on this for 3 years. Paul Pullman, who until recently was the CEO of Unilever, was working on this. In fact, he's regarded as the father of this. And when you look at what they did, it is astonishing. And there was someone else in the room who I hope you will recognize, even though he might be a little distorted. And do we all know who this guy is? Yeah, Sir Richard Branson, indeed. Sir Richard Branson. And Branson made the point when the camera was on him. He said, I don't spend too much time at the United Nations. In fact, he said, it's the first time I've ever been at the United Nations. And the way he said it, it was almost like, I don't spend any, you know what I mean? I don't really regard well what goes on at the United Nations. That was how it sort of read. And then he said, but here's why I'm here. Let's you and I, he said, explore this next great frontier where the boundaries between work and higher purpose are merging into one, where doing good really is good for being in business, or good for business. And he said, I'm here on this day because this is the first time ever that the world body, meaning the United Nations, was or had acknowledged something that you and I know to be true. Do we have any government ministers here? We have some people from the government. Where are the people from the government? Be okay with this. It's really okay, all right? So Richard said, because what we know as business owners and entrepreneurs is, you might get upset at the first bit, but it gets better, okay? So he said, governments do not change our world. He said, now governments can enable the change. There you go, you feel okay now, right? But fundamentally, it is businesses, their teams, and entrepreneurs who actually make those changes happen. Show me your hands if that makes sense to you. Does that make sense? And it does. And this is the first time that the United Nations had acknowledged that, the very first time in history. And so unlike any other session at the United Nations, no country was required to sign to these global goals. By the way, what global goals? These things here. So he said, I'm here to help launch these things. 17 things, each of them, or together they have something like 169 targets underneath them. The detail is astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing. 17 things which we have to achieve by 2030. And it's not governments that are going to do it, it's businesses that are going to do it, working with government. Does that make sense? It's nothing just that governments have to sign off and then nothing happens. You know what I'm saying, right? So we have to do these things by 2030. So here are the 17 things, and you mentioned the 3 that you're particularly working on in JA. And interesting stuff with this. And then he said, and we'll talk a little more about this, I'm going to give you a new perspective on this. And he said, there you go, business must become the real force for good in our world. Think about that in relation to what JA is doing. They are turning out entrepreneurs like no one else is doing. And those entrepreneurs will go out, they will start their businesses, they will hire more people. And so do you get, that's the ripple effect of this. And that's why that is so important, okay? That doesn't mean that it's not okay to work for a company. Of course it's okay. But fundamentally, people that are driving the business are the things. So he said, business must become a real force for good. I would say your business must become a real force for good. Are there economic benefits in that? Of course there are. But the bigger benefit is because we're now looking at things as if we had inherited or we were borrowing this from our children. It's almost like it's an obligation to do this and to think about the thing that is absolutely brilliant in this report, in my view anyway, and you'll see more on it in a moment, is that this is not about the money or anything like that that's going. This is all about the impacts that you are helping to create. And as you'll see in a moment, it is those impacts that are really, really important. So I think that your business must become, but I think there's another way of thinking about these global goals. And the global goals are a pathway for humanity. That's really what they are. Because if we don't do this, by 2030, it gets a little bit scary. How many of us have children, by the way? Can I say? Oh, what a productive lot you are. That's very good. Okay. So anyway, you get the idea, okay? So, and here we are in JA really underpinning all of that. It is as if you guys knew this was going to happen, right? That's what it's like. So let's go a little bit further. It's a pathway, I think, for humanity. But there are some issues with this. Like, for example, when you see these 17 goals, they're kind of hard to really relate to. And one of the really interesting things that's happening is that certain governments, and one of them is in Singapore, and I'm sure we're doing that here, but I just want to tell you about what I know about in Singapore. And the guys in Singapore, our sovereign fund is the fund which invests all of our taxes and all of that kind of stuff. Now, they do not invest in anything unless it fits the global goals. Just think about that. Think about the impact of that. That's huge. But then they said, maybe we need to simplify this. They probably went to a JA session or something. They said, let's see if we can simplify this. Let's just use ABC and see what happens. How can we rearrange these things? So they said, oh, if you do that, then you get ABC, and you can look on the left-hand side and you see, well, what this is actually about, it's about creating an active economy, it's about creating a beautiful society, and it's about creating a clean earth. And all of a sudden, the goals make much more sense. Are you seeing that? It makes a lot of sense. But then what they did is they added 3 words to each of these things. So, and because of the screen, so they said, this is about productive jobs, it's about sustainable cities, and it's about fulfilling lives. Oh, it's my psychiatrist. I just said no. So anyways, and then beautiful society, what is that about? That's about resilient individuals. Excuse the spacing errors there. That's because of what's happening on the screen. Resilient individuals who can take care of themselves and bounce back. Inclusive communities. I understand we have someone from the Nordic, wherever. Oh, can I just congratulate, your first name is? Helen. Can I just congratulate you as to what your government is doing on diversity? It is absolutely amazing what you guys do. And essentially, I'm not sure whether you've seen it. Say again? We can be even better together. Yeah, that's the whole point.
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, sorry, Siri. Does Siri intrude into your life as well? She doesn't. Well, okay, guess what? So, no, because I remember I was sitting in Singapore one Saturday when it was very heavily raining. And so I was at my desk and I had emails and stuff. And one of them said, you should look at this video. So I looked at the video. You probably remember the video. And what it was this white background, completely white background. And as you watched it, there was nice music. And then coming from here was this. Do we all know Harley, as in like Harley Davidson motorbike riders, right? Was this huge motorbike rider guy. Tattoos everywhere. Rings in every possible place here. And a big leather jacket, but no sleeves in the jacket. Why no sleeves? Because you want to see his muscles, right? So he came in, it's like, and my instant reaction was, oh, like that. That was my, but then over here against the white background came a very frail looking woman. And she kind of like alternate. And she came over and she stood about here. And then all of a sudden, a whole lot of other people that if you meet them in the street, you wouldn't exactly go, hello. You know, they were kind of strange. And then all of a sudden, this lady goes over to the Harley rider and hugs him. And then everybody, all of these kind of strange looking people, quote unquote, started to join the hug. It went for 3 minutes. And the message from the government came up, and it just had 3 words on it. And the 3 words were, 4 words, I beg your pardon. I should go to the program so I can count. So it said, we all are one. That's it. And then he said, that's why we support diversity. So just many congratulations on what you're doing. So anyway, I digress. So that is what a just society means. And then what about clean earth? Well, there are 3 words for that, which are pretty interesting, very simple. Fresh air, clean water, cool world. Who wouldn't want all of those 9 things? Can you imagine showing that to anyone and say, oh, would you like this? Everybody's going to say, yes, we would. How many of us see that all of a sudden when we do that rearrangement, the global goals become even more compelling? Can I see it? Yeah, really are good. You probably know about this already. So that's the global goals. Now, let's do one more thing. Oh, look at this. This was, what day am I? What day is it? I lose track. What day? Oh, look in Siri. It is it Thursday? Friday. Is it Friday? Oh my God. Okay. Okay. So let me do that. When was it? I think it was Monday. Siri's still trying to work out what I'm saying here. So I think it was Monday.
I'm sure I understand.
No, we know that you don't understand, but that's okay. That is okay. Go away. Okay. So I think it was Monday, and there was a note from one of the people or one of the groups of people now who works with the global goals. And look at this. Look, you remember I said impact investing is growing at an amazing rate, 715%. Look at this. This is the first Sustainable Development Goals linked bond in the European market, and look at what it raised, $2.5 billion. And it was 4 times oversubscribed. So when we see numbers like this, we go, whoa, maybe this is what it is all about, moving forward. And this guy, Paul Pullman, you can see him, he's regarded as the father of the global goals. Last week, week before last, he was, do you remember when Greta, you know, the Norwegian, not Norwegian, Swedish lady, Greta Thunberg, remember when she went to New York and you know how she sailed there and all of that kind of stuff? Well, Paul was right next to her at that moment. And here's what he said. Where are the business owners amongst us again? Business people amongst us right here. Was it something I said? No. Okay. He said this. He said, this is probably, talking about the global goals, it's probably the biggest business opportunity that we have ever seen in the history of mankind. Just think about that for a minute. And then think about how JA is doing that, really investing to creating impact beyond what we could otherwise imagine. By the way, this is not a direct plug, but it's something where I need to show you just quickly. This, you remember I said it's not about education, and what I said was it's about legacy. Do you remember that? And you can see here that this is a new book, and you can see that Paul Pullman was actually did the foreword of this book. It's a really, really wonderful book with 52 business owners talking about the changes that they're bringing in place. And so when we think about this word legacy, there's really lots of, and I'm sure this doesn't really translate, but stay with me if you can. When most people who speak English think about legacy, the word they think about is leaving a legacy. Does that make sense? But in English, you can play with that word a little bit. I'm sure someone clever could do it in Lithuanian as well. And you can say, well, no. Well, yes, let's worry about leaving a legacy, but the only way that we're going to leave a legacy, well, actually, let me say that again. We don't have a choice. We are going to leave a legacy. There's nothing much you can do about that. The question is, what sort of legacy is it? Is it a legacy of consumption, or is it a legacy of contribution? That's basically, by the way, you came in on your scooter this morning, didn't you? Yes, fantastic. I love that. So it's not just leaving a legacy. The way I describe it is it's living a legacy. It's not something down there. It's something now that we do in order to create that. Does that make sense? It's not the thing we do when we realize, oh my God, I don't feel too well today. Maybe there's nothing much left. And then I think the other way that we can think about this, playing with the L word again, is we can think about leveraging a legacy. And that is precisely what Mood is and what the bank and every one of us as business owners is actually doing by investing in what goes on in JA. Does that make sense? You're leveraging the legacy. So more and more people can now benefit from all of the great things that you're doing. So once again, when I think of legacy, these three things, I think of leaving one, I think of living one, and I think of leveraging one. But I want to give you just a couple of other ways of thinking about this, particularly in relation to where Angelica was. So I think there's other words we can use. Leaving one is actually all about creating an impact. That's what it's about. It's for people who can look, go, wow, look at that. But it's also about habit. How many of us go to the gym? Do any of us go to the gym? Oh, you're fit as well as productive. That's amazing. and imagine you said, I want to get fit, so I'm going to go to the gym once this year. And I'm going to do that every year. You're not going to be fit. And that's why this word is so important when we think about what we're doing as business owners. It's actually embedding this, it's baking it into the very core of what you do. I'll show you a couple of examples of that in a moment. So it's impact, which, by the way, when you think about impact, that means this is why this is so brilliant. Nowhere in here, I think, anyway, do you hear anything about the money that's going? Am I right? It's all about the numbers. It's all about the results that are being achieved. This is what true impact is about. So it's impact. It's about habit. You'll see an example of that in just a minute. And it's about connection. Those three things. In the case of JA, it's about connecting to the students. And by the way, do you think that has some difference to their parents? Absolutely. Of course it does. And do you think that has some difference in their communities? Of course it does, right? So more and more people start to get connected to this idea. And it turns out that in B1G1, or Buy One, Give One, which is what I do, that's since 2007, that's been my life, then what we talk about was those three circles that don't actually look like circles, but they are actually circles. Impact, habit, and connection. And how we do that, just very, very quickly, so that you understand that I just didn't sort of come here and say what I hope are some interesting things, but so that you understand that we're on exactly the same path. And that's why I'm so thrilled to be in this room. So in 2000, remember I said I might talk about what happened in 2010, and I might just have to do that. Oh, by the way, before I do, I found it on the web. Yes, thank you. Before I do that, have a look at this graph. This talks about what's happened since 2011. You see that right there? And this talks about all of the companies that are now doing really, really interesting things in terms of ESG reporting, sustainability. Look at that. That's like 4 times the number over 7 years. So the moment you invest in JA and the impact, you're in great company. That's what that means. And these guys said, I'll show you who they are in a minute, each of our stakeholders is essential. Now this, when you see who said this is a group of business owners, you'd know the group, who said, the reason we're here is to serve our shareholders. That's what they said until 3 weeks ago. They don't say that anymore. This is the Business Roundtable. Really, really important group of business owners. And they said, we commit to deliver value to all of them. And all of our stakeholders are the future success of our communities, our companies, our communities, and our country. And when you look in depth at that, you see the profound nature of that kind of change. So it's not people chasing profit anymore. It's people chasing impact on their team members, on their communities, and on our world. So again, when you invest in JA, you're doing really, really good things. So if we go back to that impact habit connection, that's where B1G1, what I do, is part of that. And I'm indebted to this lovely lady. This afternoon, am I allowed to say we're talking to a group of ladies? Am I allowed to say that? Yes. By the way, just look around. There are more women here than men. Yeah, that's really interesting. Why that's interesting is because I'm in awe of women. I really am. And please don't get upset by what I just said, because I know you are too. So, and the reason is, I seriously have no idea how you do what you do, but you get it. You get it. That doesn't mean that we guys can't get it, but it means that you get it intuitively. Does that make sense? You kind of know what goes on. And she is one of those people. This is Masami Sato, and I was mentoring her in 2007. And she asked 2 really interesting questions. She said, what if every time business was done, something great happened in our world? Just think about that. What a profoundly important question that is. And by the way, that's what you're doing here. And then she said, what if we could build a system and a movement to let business owners put doing good right at the heart of their business? Now that sounds like a simple thing, but it actually took a long time to do. So now, just to show you that we're on the same path, we have businesses around the world who are saying things like, every time we send an email, and by the way, there are 2.7 million emails sent per second. Remember I said it's impact and habit. Remember that? It's not one thing, it's habit. So what if we could build all of the great things that we're doing in JA into this kind of thing? A child in need gets access to an e-learning program that changes their life. Or you might have a business which says, whenever we create a new client, 18 homeless people get a nutritious meal. Or you might be able to say, whenever we sell our premium product, we help. Show me your hands if you're getting this. Is this making sense? This is where I really want you to go, to bake it in, So it's not an afterthought. It's actually part of being in business, if that makes sense. And this one, whenever someone attends our workshop, this is what happened. This is you, not me. Or it could be, how many people fly? How many people fly? You know, as in fly. You know, I don't mean personally. I mean in aeroplanes, right? We do. How many of us understand that flying is bad, as in it dumps carbon everywhere? Show me your hands if you know that, right? Right? How many of us know, not a trick question, how many of us know what carbon offsets do, or what they are? Can anyone come out here and explain what a carbon offset is? By the way, I've never met anyone who can. But what I do understand, planes are bad, trees are good. I understand that. So now in B1G1, we have people doing this. This is my one. When we fly, we find out how long each flight is, and then for every hour, we triple offset. Why would we triple offset? Because the person next to us probably doesn't understand this stuff, and the other one is for the politicians who really don't understand it sometimes, right? So, sorry, let me just go back. There it is. So, and you can see we plant 4 forest trees to help restore the environment, which, by the way, costs $1.60 for every hour. And all of a sudden, and we can even go and see the trees. Does that make sense? It's like so different, baking it in and making it palatable. And by the way, amazing how these guys track all of the numbers. We do exactly the same thing. So, and look, here's a website of a company. There it is, impact. And then we look down in here. We can track their impact. We track exactly where the impact's going. And notice how we track it. It's not about the money. Are you seeing that? It's about the impact that is being created. Never, ever, ever about that. How many think that's kind of cool? Is that cool? And guess what? Look at this. We also track that in relation to the global goals as well. So the only reason I showed you that, let me just do one little thing here. The only reason that I showed you that is so that you would understand that we are actually on exactly the same page. So let's jump to here. By the way, is all this making sense? Let me ask that again. I so wish I could do this in Lithuanian, I really do. But anyway, hopefully through the translation you got some ideas. So again, it is all about impact, it's about habit, and it's about connection. Just connecting to who we are as human beings. So that in our businesses we know every time something happens, we create an impact in some particular way in our world. And so to come back again, this is exactly the same thing. Government and businesses and schools, and where are the teachers? Are the teachers in the room as well today? The teachers? Oh, they're teaching. Oh, congratulations on what you're doing. You do just amazingly important stuff. Remember, we didn't inherit this from our forefathers. We're borrowing this from our children. So well done. So this is why I think JA is just such an extraordinary thing, and why it's just such a pleasure to be here. Because again, it's not about the fact that we educate kids and financial literacy and all of those sorts of things, and that's ever expanding, but it's because in this little wonderful little country that does some amazing things, we're leaving a different legacy. And we're leaving a different legacy. And you know who I'm talking about when I say this. We're leaving a different legacy and being an example for the world for much bigger countries. Some of them who are sort of that way, if that way is that way, if you know what I mean. Where people actually don't get it. Where they don't think we all are one. They think it's all about me. And so this legacy that you're leaving is something that is enormously important. One of the things, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you'll see that I say power of small. Lithuania, together with JA, is just an amazing example of the power, the huge power of small. Congratulations on what you're doing. Thank you for having me here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. That's very nice. Oh. Do I say Achu? Is that right? Oh, good. Please, warm applause for Angelica. There we go. How are you?
While listening to you, I know myself that, and you pointed very good, women sometimes have a feeling but cannot really put it in words. I'm so thrilled that you really talked it out, that sometimes we feel as an organization but just are not able to purely pass the message to our all our partners and all our investors. Really, really, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's just a privilege. Thank you. Awesome.
So, do we have any questions? Maybe, Paul, you can just sit over here and if you have anything you'd like to dig him up, because he's a global flyer and player and really has many cases. So now's the time if you feel like, Lithuanians are very shy to step up.
No, they're very shy. They're very shy. Siri might have a question. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for asking. What are the badges that you have here?
JCI.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you know it? Okay.
Got it.
My question is, can you share a little bit more deep with living of legacy, yeah? Living in legacy, this kind of thing, living now. Because there is sometimes could be misunderstood a little bit in different point of view, yeah? Can you share your...
Yeah. Let me share it this way. Thank you for the question, by the way. I frequently get interviewed, right, on podcasts and stuff like that, and people say, "Tell me your story," right? And what I tell them is that all of us have exactly the same thing. That is to say, where every single one of us is today, wherever we are today, is really a result of all of the choices that we made back here. Does that make sense? It's just all of these moments that we have, and by choosing particular paths, then we get to a point which impacts our legacy. So I remember, for me, it's all about being in that moment and then looking at the best options. I think was it the Dalai Lama? No, it wasn't the Dalai Lama. It was Buddha who said we have to treasure each moment. And that's what I think living a legacy means. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you once again
for
a wonderful presentation. We got some insights on how businesses can embed in living legacy and leveraging. Any examples how government organizations can embed the legacy in the everyday jobs? Sending emails and planting trees, that's fine, but usually it goes for business.
Yes. Well, as it turns out, on the 18th of November, I'm working with the Singapore government to actually answer that, not answer that question, because the government is in Singapore is very wise, and I'm sure all governments are. But they're looking at exactly that. How can we do more things so that more business owners get that? And so they're going to be starting with, for example, when you come to, where I would love them to go to, but I think it's a bit quick to do this. But I imagine, in Singapore, for example, we have an amazing transport system. We have so-called MRT, we have buses, all of those sorts of things. And so I think it would be very interesting. Well, let me give you a bigger idea, and then you'll see where I'm coming. We all know Steve Jobs, right? It's 8 years ago that he died. And I once wrote to Mr. Jobs. He didn't reply, by the way, but that's okay. And I said, so if you think about Apple just for a moment, there are now something like 1.6 billion apps, on our iPhones. And I wrote to him and I said, because Steve would always come on stage and he would say, there are 3 things that we need to look at. And then he would look at those 3 things and he would say, just one more thing, right? And I said, I think it would be wonderful if when you said, just one more thing, if you were to say, every time an app is downloaded, a child gets access to education. That's the kind of, does that make sense? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So like when we go have a coffee, wouldn't it be great if a child got access to water? When we go on a bus, wouldn't it be great if a kid who in lots of countries has to walk 20 kilometers to get to school? And so we don't understand that a bicycle, which by the way they can get for 4 cents for a day, just changes their life. We don't understand that solar lamps allow them to study at night because there is no electricity. So I think the thing is to realize that it is very tiny things that we can do. Because sometimes what we think is, in order to make a difference, it has to be like, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It doesn't. It can be very tiny things. And so that's the great question. That's the message I'm sharing with the government. And hopefully they listen. I hope. Thank you for the question.
Oh, thank you for your presentation.
Thank
it was
you
really
very much.
very inspiring and interesting. And I understood, maybe I misunderstood, but maybe I understood correct that you also do some mentoring and you were showing some slides.
Yes.
Can you expand a little bit about the mentoring and what activities you do in this area? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. But you have business owners that mentor here, don't you, that work with the kids and stuff like that? Yes. And so to some extent, I suspect that if you're involved with JA, you already know the answer to that in some ways. But really what mentoring is all about is to try to find out where it is that you want to be and really understanding that you know the answer. You already know the answer. But my role is to help you see it, to change things differently so that your perspective changes as to what is possible, and then together kind of walk hand in hand, not literally, but to walk hand in hand to make sure that happens. And it's an extraordinary privilege to be able to do that. So it means that, I'm working with entrepreneurs around the world doing, really interesting things. But it's, and I think as you and I grow older, then we understand that to have the opportunity, because right now, the business owners here are working with the kids. That's an incredible opportunity to be able to take the wisdom, if you will, that we've all accumulated and then be able to share that out. That is a fantastic example of living a legacy right there. So I hope that answered the question, yeah.
So many. Thank you for being so brave.
Yeah, that's so nice, yeah.
Yeah, so any final, yeah.
Thank you for sitting in the front row, by the way. That's always very challenging to do that.
It's only because of JA, Impact investing sounds great, is great, but it's pretty often hard to measure. And I mean, not only measuring short term, like getting water for the children, for the child, but what about long term impact? I mean, what impact will that child get in 10 years because of getting the water that time? Do you have any practice and measure?
It's a great question. We develop various algorithms to try and figure that out. It's currently it's imperfect, but it's better than not having anything. But it turns out that the World Bank is working on a whole set of things that relate to the goals that are going to make it easier to measure, because the goals are not easy to measure. They're not. And sometimes you go to schools. I was just in Kenya last week, and you go to schools and you see a line of children whose parents have paid for them to have a meal at school, and so they're in the line. And then you see the other kids who aren't able to get the food because their parents can't afford it, and you instantly see the difference. And then when you talk to the teachers, they say, can you imagine trying to learn something at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you're just so hungry? So one of the things that's great about the global goals is the interconnection of all of them, and that's kind of what makes it difficult to measure sometimes. But Like for example, let me give you, can I just extend the question because it's really, so you remember I talked about the flying and I said, we plant a tree. Remember that? And you might think, well, that's really good, right? Because we plant trees. But it's much more than that. Fortunately, there are NGOs like, for example, JA around the world that really do clever things. And so what these guys do in Kenya, listen to this, is they take a mango tree and they graft on it a fast-growing Kenyan tree. And the result of that is that instead of the tree taking 8 years to grow, it takes 2 years. The other thing that's interesting is the mango tree doesn't grow as a high tree, it grows, this grafted one, as a low tree, which means the children can pick the fruit. Now what happens in this NGO, where they're working with some 7,700 orphans actually, who are in extended families, is they want to make sure, because I think there's a lot of stuff going on where we want to make sure it's not handing out. You know, it's not giving money. It's like handing up, if that makes sense. So what happens? They sell these saplings, the little tiny trees, to the people in need, and they sell them for $1.50, and they want them to buy 10. Why do they want them to buy 10? Because at the end of 2 years, they have these 10 mango trees. Each mango tree produces about 800 mangoes, and then you work it all out. That gives them, in a year, that gives them all the money they need to send 2 kids to school. So does that make sense? So that's why it gets very interesting to look at the impact. You've got to consider all of those things. And by the way, I'm sure this happens in JA. No, I'm sure this happens. There's a school now, there are some 240 of them in rural India. And in India, the government says education is free. That's not actually true. Well, it is, but they don't tell you that you need to have a uniform. And so in India, there's a 90% dropout between primary and secondary. It's amazing because they can't afford the uniforms. And in the rural areas, it's much bigger than that because the parents want them to be on their farms, if that makes sense. And so what we do is we, together with an NGO there, we put in these e-learning systems, which the kids love. And the thing that is so interesting, and this makes it difficult to measure the impact, is you can go from one village where the kids have got this stuff, and then you go to the next village where they haven't yet got it. And you just see the difference in the kids. It's just an amazing difference because they've had access to the education. But what is so mind-blowing is that the parents, rather obviously, see the difference in the kids as well. And have a guess what happens to the parents. What the parents do in every case is they go to the school, which is actually just a shed, and the so-called teacher, and they say, can you open the school at night? Because we've seen what happens to our children, and we want to be educated as well. And the even better thing is when they do that, it's the kids who become the teacher. For that. So do you get it? So it's kind of, and I think that's one of the things that makes JA so interesting, and that report is so interesting, right? Because you see there straight away the focus on impacts. Great question. Great question. But it's an imperfect thing right now, yeah.
Well, so probably each organization, each person has their theory of change, which is what is the base for any NGO and the company which is starting on the pathway towards impact investment. So I just once again want to thank you very much for really dedicating your breakfast and morning with us. I know that your businesses and your employees and your colleagues are really waiting for you. So thank you for being with us, this small part of a change for the impact in Lithuania and the next generation of educated kids. Thank you so much,
well
Paul,
done.
once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
This is a small gift.
I saw those.
Yeah, was made by our company program participants last year. They're based in Klaipėda. It's a shampoo, so and this is the reason they made it, because
What
people
who
travel.
what's that?
So it means like.
Sepone means soap.
Yeah.
Oh,
so it means like show your. Basically, plau galvą kietai should be like help me. Wash your head, clever or great.
Wash my hair.
You wash your head.
Oh, head.
Cool.
And be cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
Something
Okay,
like
good,
this.
got it.
Wash your head, cool.
Not now, though, right?
Not
Later,
now,
okay.
no. Yeah, but it's
Thank you.
user friendly for flights. This is the problem
All
they
right,
really
that's
came
great.
up
Thank
with.
you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
So
That's
every
great.
guest, please don't forget to also take your present
Oh, yes, you have one
while
too.
coming back home.
We can watch together.
Yeah. So be cool and see you in all of our events. And yeah, you know, we have a full year of action now happening. So
Yeah.
thank you for being part of it
You
once
guys
again.
are awesome. You really are. Thank you, everybody. Hey, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.